Welcome to Alien Whispers, where thrilling HFY fiction springs to life. Embark on epic sci-fi journeys where humans defy alien doubters, steal the hearts of fierce cosmic warriors, and rise as heroes in bold, steamy intergalactic romances. If you enjoy the story, please consider subscribing. The galaxy's deadliest warrior was defeated. By Human's kiss, the arena roared like a living beast, a cacophony of alien cheers and stomping feet that shook the crystalline walls of the Zicarian Colosseum. Under the violet glow of twin moons, the air thrummed with electric anticipation. Thousands of spectators, scaled, feathered, and tentacled, had gathered on this remote planet in the Orion Arm to witness the galaxy's most feared gladiator, Vera of Clan Clythar, crush her latest challenger. Vera was a legend, a towering figure of muscle and menace, her crimson scales glinting like polished rubies under the stadium lights. Her species, the Clythari, were apex predators, their biology a cocktail of raw power and primal instinct. No one had ever walked away from her in the ring. Not alive, anyway. Today's opponent? A human. The crowd howled with laughter at the thought. Humans were soft, squishy things, fragile as a cracked eggshell, barely worth the sand they'd bleed on. Vera had scoffed when the match was announced, her triple-jawed maw curling in disdain. A human, she'd growled, her voice like gravel grinding underfoot. I'll snap him in half before the first bell. The bookmakers agreed, offering odds so lopsided that betting on the human was practically charity. In the challenger's prep chamber, Jack Ramsey adjusted the straps of his borrowed combat harness, the leather creaking against his lean frame. A former asteroid miner turned freelance pilot, Jack wasn't exactly the heroic type. He was here because of a bar bet gone wrong, a drunken boast about human grit that had somehow landed him in this death trap. His dark hair was slick with sweat, and his green eyes darted nervously to the hollow screen showing Vera's highlight reel. Claws rending steel, tails smashing boulders, opponents reduced to smears on the arena floor. This, Jack muttered to himself, was a terrible idea. The chamber door hissed open, and a Zicarian attendant, a wiry creature with too many eyes, scuttled in. Human, it chirped. You're up. Try not to die too quickly. The crowd expects a show. Jack shot at a lopsided grin. No promises, bug eyes. But I'll give it a whirl. The attendant blinked all 6 eyes in unison, clearly unimpressed, and gestured toward the tunnel leading to the arena. As Jack stepped into the blinding light of the Colosseum, the crowd's laughter hit him like a tidal wave. He squinted up at the stands, where aliens of every shape and size jeered, their translators buzzing with insults. Soft skin. Meat sack. Go back to your dirtball, human. Jack raised a hand, waving like he was at a friendly barbecue, which only made the jeers louder. Across the arena, Vera loomed, 8 feet of coiled muscle and predatory grace. Her tail, tipped with a barbed spike, lashed the air, and her golden eyes narrowed as she sized him up. You're smaller than I expected, she rumbled, her voice carrying over the crowd's din. This won't even be sport. Jack shrugged, rolling his shoulders to loosen up. Yeah, well, good things come in small packages. Ever heard that one? Vera's jaws parted in what might have been a laugh or a snarl. Hard to tell with all those teeth. Your kind is weak, she said, stepping closer, her claws flexing. No scales, no venom, no strength. Why are you even here, human? Honestly, Jack replied, scratching the back of his neck. Lost a bet. Figured I'd at least get a good story out of it before you turn me into paste. The crowd roared with amusement, but Vera's eyes flickered with something else. Curiosity, maybe? She tilted her head, her scales catching the light in a cascade of crimson. A story, she echoed. You'll have no breath to tell it when I'm done. The arena horn blared, signaling the start of the match. Vera didn't hesitate. She lunged, her claws slashing through the air with a whistle that promised pain. Jack dove to the side, rolling across the sand, his heart pounding like a jackhammer. He wasn't a fighter. Not really, but years dodging falling rocks and asteroid mines had given him reflexes sharp enough to keep him alive. For now. Vera's tail whipped toward him, the barbed tip grazing his arm and tearing a strip from his harness. The crowd cheered, baying for blood. Come on, big girl, Jack panted, scrambling to his feet. At least buy me dinner first. Vera paused, her head cocking again, as if his words were a puzzle. Dinner, she growled. You mock me. But there was a hitch in her voice, a tremor that didn't match her towering confidence. Jack didn't notice. He was too busy dodging another claw swipe that would have taken his head off. He ducked under her arm, closer than he meant to, and caught a whiff of something sharp and metallic like ozone after a storm. Her scent, maybe? Whatever it was, it made his pulse race faster than fear alone could explain. Vera's movements grew erratic, her strikes less precise. She shook her head, as if clearing a fog, and snarled. What are you doing to me, human? She demanded, her tail lashing wildly. Jack, still dodging for his life, raised his hands. Me? I'm just trying not to die here. But then it happened. She charged, her massive frame bearing down like a freight train. Jack had nowhere to run. Instinct took over, and he did the only thing his adrenaline-soaked brain could think of. He grabbed her scaled wrist, pulled her off balance, and, purely by accident, pressed his lips against her forearm in a desperate bid to push her back. The arena fell silent. Vera froze, her golden eyes wide, her scales flushing from crimson to a deep, pulsating scarlet. She staggered back, clutching her chest, her breath coming in sharp gasps. What was that? She hissed, her voice a mix of fury and something softer, something confused. Jack blinked, just as stunned. Sorry? Didn't mean to wait. Are you okay? The crowd murmured, their jeers turning to whispers. Vera's knees buckled, and she sank to the sand, her claws digging into the ground as if to anchor herself. You're toxin, she rasped, staring at him like he'd sprouted wings. It's overwhelming. Toxin, Jack echoed, backing up a step. Lady, that was just a kiss. You know, a human thing? No poison involved. But Vera wasn't listening. Her scales pulsed brighter, her breathing ragged, and her eyes locked on him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. The crowd's confusion grew louder, some shouting for the match to continue, others muttering about human tricks. The Zycarian referee, a floating orb with too many tentacles, hovered closer. Warrior Vera, can you continue? It asked. Vera didn't answer. She was staring at Jack, her expression a wild mix of anger, fascination, and something dangerously close to hunger. You, she said, her voice low and trembling. You've poisoned me with your essence. Jack's mouth fell open. My what now? Before he could process, Vera lunged again, not to attack, but to grab him by the shoulders, her claws gentle but firm. She pulled him close, her face inches from his, and inhaled deeply. This scent, she murmured, her voice almost a purr. It's not like anything I've known. The referee's tentacles waved frantically. This is highly irregular. The match is, but Vera cut it off with a snarl. The match is over, she declared, her eyes never leaving Jack's. This human, he's mine. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some cheering, some booing, all of them baffled. Jack, still pinned in her grip, managed a nervous laugh. Cool, so I'm not dead? That's a win, right? But as Vera's scales pulsed even brighter, and her grip tightened with a possessiveness that sent his heart racing, he realized this was no victory. It was something else entirely, something that might just get him in deeper trouble than any arena fight. The twin moons hung low, casting jagged shadows across the arena as the crowd's confusion morphed into a cacophony of shouts and chants. Vera of Clan Clythar, the galaxy's deadliest warrior, stood motionless, her massive frame towering over Jack Ramsay, her claws still gripping his shoulders. Her scales pulsed a vivid scarlet, each throb synchronized with her ragged breaths. Her golden eyes bore into him, wild and unblinking, as if trying to unravel a mystery woven into his very skin. Jack, for his part, was doing his best not to pass out from sheer panic. Okay, big lady, he said, his voice cracking, Let's maybe take a breather and talk this out, yeah? The Zycarian referee, its tentacles flailing like a storm-tossed squid, hovered closer. Warrior Vera, it squawked, its voice amplified by the arena's sonic relays. You have declared the match concluded. State your intent. The crowd leaned forward, their jeers quieting into an uneasy murmur. Vera's gaze didn't waver from Jack. This human, she said, her voice low but carrying a weight that silenced the stands, has invoked the right of binding. I claim him as my chosen. Jack's jaw dropped. You're what now? He sputtered, his mind racing to catch up. The crowd exploded into a mix of gasps, cheers, and outraged roars. The referee's tentacles froze mid-flail, its glowing orb flickering as if processing a system error. The right of binding, it echoed, its tone a mix of disbelief and dread. That is unprecedented. A human cannot. Vera's snarl cut it off, her tail lashing the sand with a crack like thunder. He has marked me, she growled, her scales flaring brighter. The pact is sealed. Jack raised a hand, tried to ignore the fact that he was still pinned in her grip. Time out? Can someone explain what's happening before I accidentally start an intergalactic incident? The referee's tentacles twitched, and it turned its orb toward him, its voice dripping with disdain. Human, you have invoked a clithery ritual by touching Vera with your lips. The right of binding is a sacred pact, a claim of unity. She believes you have chosen her as a mate. Jack's face went slack, his brain short-circuiting. Mate? It was a kiss. An accident. I was just trying not to get skewered. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some aliens laughing, others shouting accusations of trickery. Vera's grip tightened, her claws pricking his skin through his torn harness. You lie, she hissed, though her voice trembled with something softer, uncertainty, maybe? Your essence, it burns in me. No clithery could withstand it. She leaned closer, her breath hot against his face, and Jack caught that sharp, metallic scent again, like a storm about to break. It made his head spin, and not just from fear. Before he could respond, a deep, resonant chime echoed through the Colosseum, silencing the crowd. The arena's central hollow projector flared to life, casting a towering image of a clithery elder, his scales dulled by age, but his presence commanding. Enough, the elder boomed, his triple jaws snapping with authority. I am Zorath, High Arbiter of Clan Clythar. This farce ends now. Vera, release the human and explain yourself. Vera's eyes narrowed, but she didn't let go. He is mine, Arbiter, she said, her voice defiant. The right is sacred. You cannot deny it. Zoratha's image flickered, his golden eyes glinting with cold calculation. The right is sacred, he agreed, but a human cannot invoke it. Their kind is incompatible. You will submit to the trial of purity to prove this bond is true. If it is not, the human will be executed for defiling our traditions. Jack's stomach dropped. Executed, he yelped. For a kiss? That's a bit extreme, don't you think? The crowd roared with approval, clearly eager for blood. His blood. Vera's scales dimmed slightly, her grip loosening just enough for Jack to wiggle free. She turned to face the hollow image, her tail coiling like a spring. I accept the trial, she declared, her voice steady but laced with something fierce, protective. The human will prove his worth. Jack threw up his hands. Prove my what? I'm just a guy who lost a bet. I don't even know what's going on. But Vera's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, he saw something beyond her warrior's fire, a flicker of vulnerability, like she was as lost in this as he was. The referee's tentacles waved, signaling the end of the proceedings. The trial of purity will commence at dawn, it announced. The human and Vera will face the crucible of Zykar together. Failure means death for both. The crowd erupted into a frenzy, chanting Vera's name while hurling insults at Jack. He barely noticed, his mind stuck on the word death. As arena guards, hulking Zycarians with plasma spears, moved to escort them out, Vera grabbed his arm, pulling him close. You will not die, she murmured, her voice low and fierce. I will not allow it. The guards led them through a maze of tunnels beneath the Colosseum, the walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that cast eerie shadows. Jack's heart pounded, his thoughts a jumble of fear and confusion. "Okay, Vera," he said, jogging to keep up with her long strides. "Mind filling me in? What's this trial, and why does everyone want me dead over a stupid kiss?" Vera's scales flickered, her expression unreadable. "The trial of purity tests the bond between chosen ones," she said, her voice clipped. "We face the crucible, a labyrinth of dangers on Zykar's surface. If our bond is true, we survive. If not," she trailed off, her tail twitching. Jack ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. "Great. So we're stuck in a death maze because you think I'm your soulmate? Lady, I don't even know your favorite color." Vera stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her eyes searched his, and for a moment, her fierce facade cracked. "You mock me," she said, her voice softer, almost hurt. "But I feel it, human. Your essence, it calls to me. I cannot explain it." Jack swallowed hard, caught off guard by the raw emotion in her words. "Look," he said, gentler now. "I'm not trying to mock you. I'm way out of my depth here. Help me understand." Before Vera could respond, the guards shoved them into a holding chamber, a stark room carved from obsidian with a single glowing crystal in the ceiling. The door slammed shut, leaving them alone. Vera paced, her tail lashing, while Jack slumped against the wall, rubbing his bruised arm. "Okay," he said, forcing a grin. "So we're partners now, huh? Any tips for surviving this crucible thing?" Vera paused, her scales pulsing faintly. "The crucible is alive," she said, her voice low. "It senses weakness, feeds on doubt. Only those bound by truth can navigate it." She looked at him, her eyes intense. "You must trust me, human, and I must trust you." Jack's grin faded. Trust a warrior who'd nearly killed him? Trust himself to survive a sentient death trap? This was no bar bet anymore. This was life or death, and the stakes were climbing faster than he could keep up. As Vera's scales pulsed in the dim light, and her gaze held his with an intensity that made his chest tighten, he realized the real conflict wasn't just the crucible. It was whatever was happening between them, something neither of them understood, but neither could escape. The obsidian chamber felt like a tomb, its walls swallowing sound except for the faint hum of the glowing crystal overhead. Jack Ramsey leaned against the cold stone, his bruised arm throbbing, while Vera paced like a caged predator, her tail lashing sparks against the floor. Her scales pulsed a restless scarlet, each flare casting fleeting shadows that danced across her towering frame. The air was thick with tension, and Jack's attempt at a grin did little to cut through it. "So," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "you come with a manual for this whole chosen one deal, or are we just winging it?" Vera stopped mid-stride, her golden eyes snapping to him. For a moment, he thought she might snap him in half for the quip, but her jaws parted in a low, rumbling sound. Almost a laugh, but too raw, too uncertain. "You speak as if this is a game, human," she said, her voice a mix of exasperation and something softer, like she was trying to puzzle him out. "The crucible is no jest. It will test us, our bond, our truth. If we fail," she trailed off, her tail coiling tightly, and Jack caught a flicker of fear in her eyes, so brief he almost missed it. He pushed off the wall, ignoring the ache in his muscles. "Yeah, I got the death part loud and clear. But this bond thing, what's it even mean? You keep saying my essence is doing something to you, but I'm just a guy, Vera. No magic, no toxins, just a bad habit of sticking my foot in my mouth." He gestured vaguely at himself, hoping his honesty might bridge the gap between them. Vera's scales dimmed slightly, and she stepped closer, her presence overwhelming yet strangely hesitant. "Your kind is different," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "When you touched me, your lips, your scent, it woke something in me, a fire I cannot quench. Clithery do not feel this way unless the bond is true." Jack's heart skipped a beat, not just from her words but from the way she looked at him, like he was both a threat and a treasure. He swallowed hard, trying to keep things light. Look, I'm flattered, really, but where I'm from, a kiss doesn't mean we're picking out curtains together. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding? Like a cosmic allergy or something. Vera's eyes narrowed, and she leaned in, her breath hot against his face. You deny it, she growled, but there was a tremor in her voice, a crack in her warrior's armor. Yet I feel you even now. Your heart races. Your scent shifts. You cannot lie to me. He froze, caught off guard by how right she was. His pulse was hammering, and not just from fear. There was something about her intensity, her raw strength, that metallic storm scent, that pulled at him in ways he couldn't explain. Okay, he said, raising his hands, let's say there's something. Doesn't mean I'm ready to jump into a death maze with you. We barely know each other. What's your deal, Vera? Why is this bond thing worth risking everything for? Vera pulled back, her tail twitching as if his question had struck a nerve. She turned away, her claws flexing against the stone floor. I am Clithery, she said, her voice tight. We are born to fight, to conquer. I have slain countless foes, claimed victories no other could. But the rite of binding, it is rare, sacred. To find a chosen one is to find purpose beyond battle. She glanced at him, her eyes softer now, almost pleading. I felt nothing until you. Now I burn. If I ignore this, I betray my blood. If I fail the trial, I lose everything. Jack's chest tightened. For all her strength, Vera was as trapped as he was, caught in a web of instinct and tradition she didn't fully understand. He took a cautious step toward her, keeping his voice gentle. Hey, I get it. You're all in on this, and that's kind of badass, honestly. But I'm not Clithery. I don't know your rules, and I sure as hell don't know how to be your chosen anything. Can we at least work together on this? Like partners, not whatever this mate thing is. Vera's scales pulsed, and she tilted her head, studying him. Partners, she echoed, as if testing the word. You would trust me, human? After I nearly killed you. Jack grinned, though it was more bravado than confidence. Nearly's the key word. Besides, you're the one who's got to trust me. I'm not exactly Colosseum material, but I'm scrappy. Got me through asteroid mines. Might get us through this crucible. To his surprise, Vera's jaws parted in that rumbling, almost laugh again. Scrappy, she repeated, her tail uncurling slightly. A strange word, but it suits you. She stepped closer, her claws brushing his arm. Not threatening, but deliberate, like she was testing something. Her touch sent a jolt through him, and her scales flared brighter. Your essence speaks even when you do not, she murmured, her voice low and warm. It is distracting. Jack's face heated, and he cleared his throat, trying to steer things back to safer ground. Right, let's focus on not dying, yeah? Tell me more about this crucible. What are we up against? Vera nodded, her expression sharpening as she slipped back into warrior mode. The crucible is a living labyrinth, she said, pacing again. Its paths shift, its traps adapt. Beasts, illusions, energy storms, it tests body and mind. But its core seeks truth. If our bond is false, it will sense it and consume us. Jack whistled low. Sounds like a real party. Any weaknesses? Like, does it hate bad jokes or something? Vera's eyes glinted with what might have been amusement. You jest, but your unpredictability may be our strength. Clithery faced the crucible with force, but you humans, you think differently. Perhaps it will guide us. She paused, then added quieter, I have never faced it with another. It is unsettling. He caught the vulnerability in her tone and took a chance, resting a hand on her scaled arm. Her scales were warm, smoother than he'd expected, and they pulsed under his touch. Hey, he said, meeting her gaze, we're in this together, okay? I'm not going to let you down. Well, I'll try not to. No promises if there's like a giant laser squid or something. Vera stared at his hand, then at him, her scales flaring a deep crimson. You touch me so easily, she said, her voice a mix of wonder and confusion. No Clithery would dare. Yet you do not fear me. Jack shrugged, his grin returning. Oh, I'm plenty scared, but you're not so bad. Kinda intense, sure, but I've dealt with worse. Like that time I owed a Haxian smuggler 50 credits. Now, that was terrifying. Vera's jaws twitched, and she let out a full laugh this time. A deep, resonant sound that echoed in the chamber. "You are strange, Jack Ramsey," she said, her tail brushing his leg almost playfully. "But perhaps that strangeness will save us." The moment hung between them, charged with a warmth that felt dangerous and thrilling all at once. Jack's hand lingered on her arm, and he realized he didn't want to pull away. Whatever this was, bond, attraction, or just adrenaline-fueled insanity, it was real and it was pulling them closer. But the weight of the crucible loomed, and he knew they couldn't afford to get lost in it. Not yet. "All right, partner," he said, stepping back but keeping his tone light. "Let's make a plan. You bring the claws, I'll bring the charm." "Deal." Vera's eyes softened, and she nodded. "Deal," she said, her voice steady but laced with something new. Hope, maybe. As they began to strategize, trading ideas and teasing barbs, the chamber felt less like a tomb and more like a starting line. The crucible waited, a deadly puzzle that would test not just their survival, but whatever was growing between them. And as Vera's scales pulsed in time with her words, Jack felt a spark of something he hadn't expected. Not just fear, but determination. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for her. The obsidian chamber's oppressive silence was shattered by a low, ominous rumble that vibrated through the stone floor. Jack Ramsey froze mid-sentence, his hand still hovering near Vera's scaled arm. The glowing crystal overhead flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to writhe like living things. Vera's golden eyes snapped to the chamber's sealed door, her tail coiling tightly as her scales flared a vivid scarlet. "It begins," she growled, her voice taut with urgency. "The crucible calls us." Jack's stomach lurched. "Already? I thought we had till dawn." He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding as the rumble grew louder, like a beast waking from slumber. The door hissed open, revealing a tunnel lit by pulsing veins of blue light that snaked along the walls. The Zycarian guards stood at the entrance, their plasma spears crackling with energy. "Move," one barked, its voice a harsh buzz through its translator. The trial of purity waits for no one. Vera grabbed Jack's arm, her claws gentle but firm, and pulled him toward the tunnel. "Stay close," she said, her eyes scanning the darkness ahead. "The crucible is alive, and it hungers for weakness." Jack managed a shaky grin, though his knees felt like jelly. "Great. So it's a picky eater, and we're the main course. Any last-minute tips?" Vera's jaws twitched, but she didn't laugh this time. "Trust your instincts, human. They've kept you alive this far." The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. The bioluminescent veins pulsed faster, their rhythm almost like a heartbeat, and Jack's skin prickled with the sense of being watched. The guards stayed behind, their spears lowering as the door sealed shut with a clang that echoed like a death knell. "Guess it's just us now," Jack muttered, his voice sounding small in the vastness of the tunnel. Vera's tail brushed his leg, a fleeting reassurance. "Not just us," she said. "The crucible sees all." They emerged into a cavern so vast it defied comprehension, its ceiling lost in a haze of violet mist. The floor was a mosaic of shifting stone tiles, each etched with glowing runes that flared and faded like dying stars. Jagged spires of crystal jutted from the ground, their surfaces reflecting distorted versions of Jack and Vera that seemed to move on their own. The air crackled with static, and a distant roar, half beast, half storm, echoed through the chamber. Jack whistled low. "Okay, this is officially the worst theme park I've ever been to." Vera's eyes narrowed, her claws flexing. "The crucible reshapes itself to test us. These runes, they judge our bond. Step carefully, human." She took a tentative step onto a tile, and the runes beneath her flared green, steady and calm. Jack followed, mimicking her movements, but the tile under his foot pulsed red, and a sharp crack split the air. The ground lurched, and a crystal spire shot upward inches from his leg, its edge grazing his thigh and drawing a thin line of blood. "Whoa!" he yelped, stumbling back. What the hell was that? Vera's tail lashed, her scales dimming. "The crucible senses doubt," she said, her voice tight. "Your fear, it feeds on it." Jack clutched his bleeding thigh, his pulse racing. "Doubt? Lady, I'm terrified. This place wants to turn me into shish kebab." Vera grabbed his arm, pulling him onto her tile, her warmth steadying him. "Focus," she hissed. "Feel the bond. Let guide you." Her eyes locked onto his, fierce but pleading, and for a moment, the chaos of the cavern faded. Jack took a shaky breath, nodding. "Right. Bond. Got it. Let's not die, okay?" They moved together, Vera leading with the grace of a predator, Jack stumbling but keeping pace. The tiles shifted underfoot, some glowing green, others flashing red, and the cavern seemed to fight their progress. Spires erupted without warning, forcing them to dodge and weave, while gusts of searing wind howled from unseen vents, carrying whispers that clawed at Jack's mind. Doubts, fears, memories of every mistake he'd ever made. "You're nothing," the voices hissed. "A weak human, unworthy of her." Jack gritted his teeth, shaking his head. "Shut up," he muttered, focusing on Vera's steady presence. But the crucible wasn't done. A low growl rumbled through the cavern, and the mist parted to reveal a hulking shape, a beast of living crystal, its body a jagged mass of edges that shimmered with malevolent light. Its eyes twin voids of black, fixed on them, and its maw opened to unleash a scream that rattled Jack's bones. Vera's scales flared, her claws extending. "A shardwraith," she snarled. "It hunts the unworthy. Stay behind me." She lunged, her claws slashing at the creature, but the beast's crystalline hide deflected her blows, sending sparks flying. Jack's mind raced. Stay behind? No way. He wasn't about to let Vera fight alone. He scanned the cavern, his miner's instincts kicking in. The spires, the tiles, the runes, they weren't random. There was a pattern, a rhythm to the crucible's chaos. "Vera!" he shouted, dodging a swipe from the shardwraith's claw. The tiles, they're a grid, like a circuit. Step on the green ones in sequence. Vera glanced back, her eyes flashing with surprise, but she nodded. "Do it!" she roared, grappling with the beast to buy him time. Jack sprinted across the tiles, his boots slamming onto the green runes in a frantic dance. Each step sent a pulse through the cavern, the runes glowing brighter, their energy building like a storm. The shardwraith shrieked, its movements slowing as the tile's rhythm disrupted its form. "The heart of the crucible," Vera said, her voice grim. "It will test us together. If our bond is false, it will destroy us." Jack's grin faded. No pressure then. He took a step toward the bridge, but Vera grabbed his hand, her claws enveloping his fingers. "Human," she said, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. "If we fall, know that I do not regret this. You are more than I expected." Jack's chest tightened, her words hitting harder than any blow. "Same here," he said, squeezing her hand. "Let's show this place what we're made of." They stepped onto the bridge, the chasm below swirling with violet energy that whispered death. The gate loomed closer, its light intensifying, and Jack felt the crucible's presence like a weight on his soul, probing, judging. The air grew thick, the whispers louder, and Vera's scales flickered erratically. "It doubts us," she hissed, her grip tightening. Jack's heart raced, but he forced a laugh. "Then let's give it something to believe in." He pulled her close, ignoring the chasm's pull, and pressed his forehead to hers, a human gesture he hoped she'd understand. "We're in this together, Vera. No doubts." Her scales steadied, flaring a brilliant crimson, and the gate's light softened, as if acknowledging their resolve. But the bridge trembled, and the whispers became a scream, signaling that the crucible's final test was far from over. Jack and Vera exchanged a glance, their bond unspoken but unshakable, and stepped toward the gate, ready to face whatever lay beyond, or die trying. The bridge trembled beneath Jack, Ramsay, and Vera as they approached the crystal gate, its pulsating light bathing the cavern in an eerie glow. The chasm below churned with violet energy, its whispers now a deafening chorus of doubt that clawed at Jack's mind. "You'll fail her," they hissed. "You're just a human, weak, unworthy." He gritted his teeth, his hands still clasped in Vera's, her claws warm and steady against his skin. Her scales blazed crimson, a beacon in the chaos, but her golden eyes flickered with strain as the gate's energy pressed against them. "The crucible tests our truth," she growled, her voice tight. "It sees everything." Jack's legs felt like lead, but he forced a grin. "Yeah? Well, it's about to get an eyeful of human stubbornness." He squeezed her hand, ignoring the screams of the chasm, and took another step. The bridge quaked, tiles cracking underfoot, and a gust of searing wind slammed into them, nearly knocking him off balance. Vera's tail whipped around his waist, anchoring him. "Stay with me, human," she snarled, her voice fierce but laced with something softer. Fear, not for herself, but for him. Jack's heart thudded. "Not going anywhere," he said, meeting her gaze. "Partners, remember?" The gate loomed closer, its surface rippling like liquid starlight, and the air grew thick with a pressure that made Jack's ears pop. The whispers intensified, now targeting Vera. "He'll betray you," they hissed. "His kind is frail, fleeting. You are Clithery. Why bind yourself to weakness?" Her scales flickered, dimming for a moment, and her grip on his hand tightened, almost painfully. "Ignore them," Jack said, his voice cutting through the noise. "They're just trying to mess with us. We got this." But Vera's eyes were distant, her jaws clenched, as if the crucible's words had struck a deeper wound. They reached the gate, its light so intense it burned Jack's eyes. The bridge shuddered violently, and a low hum emanated from the gate, vibrating through their bones. Before they could react, the gate pulsed, and a wave of energy surged outward, slamming into them. Jack stumbled, his vision blurring, but Vera held him upright, her tail tightening around him. "It's probing us," she hissed, her scales flaring erratically. "It seeks our deepest truths." Jack's head spun, the whispers now a roar, and he felt something cold and invasive slither through his thoughts. Memories of failed jobs, lost friends. Every moment he doubted himself. Oh no," he muttered, shaking his head. "Get out of my brain, you cosmic creep." But the crucible wasn't done. The gate pulsed again, and the cavern vanished, replaced by a void of swirling violet mist. Jack and Vera stood on a platform of glowing runes, suspended in nothingness. Before them, a figure emerged from the mist, a towering Clithery, its scales black as obsidian, its eyes twin voids of judgment. "You dare claim the right of binding?" It boomed, its voice shaking the platform. "A human and a Clithery? Your bond is a lie, a mockery of our blood." Vera stepped forward, her claws flexing, but Jack noticed her tail trembling. "Our bond is true," she snarled, though her voice wavered. "He is my chosen." The figure's eyes narrowed, and it pointed a claw at Jack. "Prove it, human. The crucible demands sacrifice. One must fall for the other to rise. Choose." The platform split, a chasm opening between Jack and Vera, its edges glowing with runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. Vera's eyes widened, her scales dimming. "No," she whispered, her voice raw. "This is not the way." But the figure's voice was relentless. "Choose, or both perish." Jack's stomach twisted. Sacrifice? He wasn't built for this. Hell, he wasn't even supposed to be here. But Vera's gaze locked onto his, and he saw something that hit harder than fear. Trust, fragile but fierce, like she believed he could find a way out. "Screw your rules," Jack snapped, stepping toward the chasm. "I'm not choosing. We're both walking out of here." The figure laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Foolish human. The crucible does not bend." But Jack's minor instincts were kicking in, the same ones that had kept him alive in collapsing tunnels. This wasn't just a test of strength. It was a puzzle, a trick. The runes on the platform weren't random. They matched the ones from the cavern, the ones he'd sequenced to defeat the Shard Wraith. Vera, he said, keeping his voice steady. The runes, they're the key. We don't have to choose. We just have to sync up, like before. Vera's eyes flashed with confusion, but she nodded, her tail brushing his leg. What do you see, human? She asked, her voice steadying. Jack scanned the runes, his mind racing. They pulsed in a pattern, alternating green and red, like a signal waiting to be completed. It's a circuit, he said, his voice rising with excitement. The Crucible wants us to prove our bond, right? So we move together, step for step, green to green. Trust me. The figure's eyes glinted, but it said nothing, as if daring them to try. Jack took Vera's hand, ignoring the chasm's pull, and stepped onto the first green rune. It flared brightly, steady and calm. Vera followed, her claws tightening around his fingers, and her rune glowed in sync. The platform stabilized, the chasm narrowing slightly. Keep going, Jack said, his grin returning. We're rewriting the rules. They moved together, their steps a clumsy but determined dance, each green rune flaring brighter than the last. The whispers grew frantic, the figure's form flickering, as if the crucible itself was rattled by their defiance. Impossible, it hissed, but Jack just laughed. Yeah, humans are good at that. With each step, the platform solidified, the chasm shrinking until it was barely a crack. The figure roared, its form dissolving into mist, and the gate's light surged, enveloping them. Jack felt a jolt, like a current running through his veins, and Vera gasped, her scales blazing so brightly they lit up the void. The mist cleared, and they were back in the cavern, standing before the gate, its surface now still, its light a soft, approving glow. The whispers were gone, replaced by a low, resonant hum that felt almost welcoming. Jack panted, his legs shaking, but he didn't let go of Vera's hand. Did we just win? He asked, his voice hoarse. Vera's eyes were wide, her scales still radiant. You saw through it, she said, her voice a mix of awe and relief. The Crucible's trap. It demanded sacrifice, but you found another way. No Clithery would have thought to do that. Jack shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. Just doing what humans do best. Cheating the system with a little brain power. But his grin faded as he saw the look in her eyes. Not just pride, but something deeper, something that made his chest ache. Vera stepped closer, her tail curling around his leg, and rested a claw against his cheek. You could have chosen to let me fall, she said, her voice soft but intense. Yet you risked everything for us both. What? Jack swallowed, caught off guard by the question. Because you're worth it, he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. And I'm not the type to leave my partner hanging. Her scales pulsed, and for a moment, he thought she might kiss him or eat him. It was hard to tell with Clithery. Instead, she pressed her forehead to his, a gesture that felt more intimate than any kiss. You are more than I deserve, she murmured, her breath warm against his skin. The gate hummed louder, and its surface parted, revealing a tunnel bathed in golden light. The Crucible had accepted them, but Jack knew this wasn't the end. The trial of purity was over, but the real challenge, whatever lay beyond the gate, was just beginning. He squeezed Vera's hand, his grin returning. Ready for round 2, big lady? Vera's jaws parted in a fierce smile, her scales blazing. With you, human? Always. The golden light of the tunnel bathed Jack Ramsey and Vera in a warm glow, but the air was heavy, charged with a hum that prickled Jack's skin like static before a storm. The crystal gate had sealed behind them with a resonant thud, leaving no way back. The tunnel stretched ahead, its walls smooth and translucent, pulsing with veins of amber energy that seemed to watch their every step. Vera's scales shimmered crimson, her tail swaying with cautious grace, but her golden eyes were sharp, scanning for threats. Jack's hand lingered in hers, their fingers still entwined from the trial before, and he felt her claws flex, steady but tense. This place gives me the creeps, he muttered, his voice echoing faintly. Feels like we're walking into a dragon's belly. Vera's jaws twitched, her gaze flicking to him. "The Crucible's heart lies ahead," she said, her voice low and edged with warning. "The trial of purity tested our bond. This will test our will." She squeezed his hand, her warmth grounding him, but her scales flickered, betraying a rare uncertainty. Jack forced a grin, though his heart was pounding. "Will, huh? Good thing I'm stubborn as hell. What's the worst it can throw at us?" Vera's eyes narrowed, and she didn't answer, which was somehow worse than any warning she could have given. The tunnel widened into a vast chamber, its ceiling a dome of glittering crystal that refracted the amber light into 1,000 dancing sparks. At its center stood a massive structure, a spire of black obsidian, its surface etched with runes that pulsed red and gold, like a heartbeat. The air grew hotter, thicker, and a low rumble vibrated through the floor, making Jack's teeth ache. Around the spire, the ground was cracked, radiating heat that shimmered in waves, and faint shadows moved within the cracks, too quick to follow. "Okay," Jack said, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's not ominous at all. What's the deal with the creepy tower?" Vera's tail lashed, her scales flaring brighter. "The Spire of Ascendance," she said, her voice reverent but strained. "The Crucible's final test. It guards the sanctum, where our bond will be sealed, or broken. Only those worthy can reach it." She pointed a claw at the spire, and Jack noticed faint tendrils of energy arcing from its base, like lightning trapped in glass. "The spire is alive," she continued. "It will challenge us, mind, body, spirit. If we falter, it will consume us." Jack's stomach twisted, but he kept his tone light. "Consume us? Man, this place needs a better hospitality department." Vera's eyes glinted with that almost laugh he was starting to recognize, but it faded quickly. "Your jest will not shield you here, human," she said, stepping toward the spire. "Stay close. The spire senses weakness." Jack jogged to keep up, his boots slipping on the cracked stone. "Weakness? I'm practically a beacon of confidence. Just don't tell it I'm allergic to dying." As they approached the spire, the runes flared brighter, and a wave of heat slammed into them, forcing Jack to shield his face. The ground trembled, and the shadows in the cracks coalesced, forming sleek, predatory shapes, creatures of molten stone and flickering energy, their eyes glowing like embers. "Ember hounds," Vera snarled, her claws extending. "Guardians of the spire. They hunt as one." The creatures circled, their movements fluid and eerily silent, their heat warping the air. Jack's pulse raced, but he scanned the chamber, his miner's instincts kicking in. The spire's energy wasn't random. It pulsed in sync with the hounds, like a signal controlling them. "Vera, hold up," he said, grabbing her arm before she could charge. "These things, they're tied to the spire, like drones to a hub. If we disrupt the signal, maybe we can slow them down." Vera's eyes flashed with surprise, but she nodded. "You see patterns where I see only foes," she said, her voice tinged with admiration. "What do you propose?" Jack pointed at a cluster of runes near the spire's base, their pulses slightly out of sync with the rest. They're the weak link. If we can mess with them, maybe overload them, the hounds might glitch out." The Ember hounds lunged, their jaws snapping with molten teeth. Vera roared, her tail whipping one back as her claws slashed another, sending sparks flying. Jack dove behind a crystal outcrop, his mind racing. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew systems, asteroid rigs, ship engines, anything with a pulse you could tweak. The runes were like circuit nodes, and he'd bet his last credit they could be shorted. "Cover me," he shouted, sprinting toward the spire. Vera fought with ferocious grace, her scales blazing as she held the hounds at bay, but her voice was tight. "Hurry, human. They adapt." Jack skidded to the runes, his hands hovering over their pulsing surface. The heat was unbearable, scorching his skin, but he focused, tracing the energy flow. The runes hummed under his touch, their rhythm faltering as he pressed two misaligned ones simultaneously. A sharp crack echoed, and the spire's energy flickered, the hounds stumbling mid-stride, their forms glitching like bad holovids. Gotcha! Jack grinned, but the victory was short-lived. The spire pulsed violently, and a surge of red energy arced toward him, grazing his shoulder and sending him sprawling. Pain seared through him, his vision swimming, but Vera's roar cut through the haze. Jack! She was at his side in an instant, her tail coiling protectively as she hauled him up. Her scales were dim, her breath ragged, but her eyes burned with fury and fear. "You reckless fool," she hissed, her claws steadying him. "Do not die on me." Jack gasped, clutching his scorched shoulder. "Not planning on it," he croaked, forcing a grin. "Just giving the spire a bad day." Vera's jaws twitched, but her grip softened, and for a moment, her touch felt less like a warrior's and more like something tender, desperate. The hounds recovered, their forms stabilizing, but they were slower, less coordinated. Vera pulled Jack behind the spire, her tail shielding him from another energy arc. "Your plan worked," she said, her voice fierce with pride. "But the spire learns. We must reach the sanctum before it overwhelms us." Jack nodded, his head clearing despite the pain. The spire's peak was visible now, a platform bathed in golden light, but the path was a gauntlet of shifting runes and crackling energy. "Together," he said, meeting her gaze. Like always, they moved as one, Vera's strength complementing Jack's quick thinking. She smashed through obstacles, her claws shattering crystal barriers, while Jack guided their steps, dodging red runes and exploiting the spire's faltering rhythm. The hounds pursued, their heat singeing the air, but Jack and Vera were a team now, their bond a silent rhythm that matched the spire's pulse. Each step felt like defiance, each glance a promise. Jack's shoulder burned, but Vera's presence, her warmth, her fire, kept him going. "You're not half bad at this," he panted, ducking an energy arc. Vera's laugh was sharp, vibrant. "And you, human, are more than I ever dreamed." The platform loomed closer, but the spire's runes flared red, and the ground split, a chasm of molten energy erupting between them and their goal. The hounds closed in, their eyes blazing, and the spire's hum became a scream, as if enraged by their progress. Jack's heart sank, but Vera's claws tightened around his hand, her scales blazing crimson. "We are not done," she growled, her voice a beacon in the chaos. "Not while we stand together." Jack grinned, his fear giving way to something fiercer. Trust, not just in her, but in them. The sanctum was within reach, but the spire's final test was coming, and it would demand everything they had. The chasm of molten energy roared below Jack, Ramsey, and Vera, its searing light casting their shadows against the spire of Ascendance's obsidian surface. The platform they stood on trembled, its runes pulsing red with a fury that matched the scream of the spire's hum, as if the crucible itself raged at their defiance. The Ember Hounds, their molten forms flickering but relentless, closed in from behind, their ember eyes locked on their prey. Jack's shoulder throbbed from the spire's earlier strike, but Vera's claws gripped his hand, her crimson scales blazing like a star about to go nova. "The sanctum is beyond this chasm," she growled, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. "The spire's final test. It will not let us pass easily." Jack's breath hitched, his eyes darting to the chasm's edge, where the platform ended in a sheer drop. The sanctum's golden glow shimmered on the other side, tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far. "Easily," he panted, forcing a grin despite the heat singeing his skin. "This place doesn't do easy. Got a plan, partner?" Vera's golden eyes met his, fierce but steady, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just them. Her warmth, her fire, the unspoken trust that had carried them this far. "We leap," she said, her tail coiling around his waist. "Together, the spire will judge our bond." "Leap." Jack's voice cracked, his gaze dropping to the molten abyss. "That's a one-way ticket to crispy. There's got to be another way." The hounds lunged, their jaws snapping inches from his leg, and Vera's tail yanked him back, her claws slashing one into a shower of sparks. "There's no other way," she roared, her scales flaring brighter. "The spire demands faith, faith in us." But Jack's minor instinct screamed against blind trust. He'd survived collapsing tunnels by finding patterns, not jumping into voids. His eyes scanned the platform, the chasm, the spire's runes. There had to be a trick, a system to hack. The runes on the platform caught his attention, their red pulses syncing with the spire's scream, but faltering at the edges, like a signal fraying under strain. He'd seen this before, in the cavern with the shard wraith, when he'd sequenced the tiles to disrupt the crucible's rhythm. "Vera, wait," he shouted, pulling her back as another hound lunged. "The runes, they're a control grid. If we sync them, we can shut this chasm down." Vera's eyes widened, her tail tightening around him. "You see this now?" she hissed, but there was no disbelief in her voice. Only trust, sharp and unwavering. "Do it, human. I'll hold them." Vera spun, her claws a blur as she tore into the hounds, her roars drowning out their molten snarls. Jack dropped to his knees, his hands hovering over the runes, their heat scorching his palms. The spire's scream grew louder, a psychic weight that clawed at his mind, whispering failure, death, unworthiness. "Not today," he gritted out, focusing on the rune's pulses. They weren't random. They formed a sequence, a lock waiting for the right key. His fingers danced across the platform, pressing green runes in a pattern he felt more than saw, each touch sending a jolt through the spire's rhythm. The chasm's roar faltered, its molten light flickering, but the hounds pressed harder, one grazing Vera's side, dimming her scales. "Jack!" Vera's voice was strained, her claws dripping with molten slag. "Hurry!" Jack's heart pounded, his hands shaking as he hit the final rune. A sharp crack echoed, and the platform shuddered, the chasm's energy collapsing into a thin, wavering bridge of solidified light. The hounds froze, their forms glitching, but the spire's scream peaked, and a surge of red energy erupted from its core, arcing toward them like a guillotine. Jack dove, tackling Vera onto the bridge, the energy grazing his back and searing his skin. Pain exploded, but he clung to her, his breath ragged. "Move," he gasped. "Now!" They scrambled across the bridge, the hounds recovering and giving chase, their heat scorching the air. The sanctum's glow was blinding now, its entrance a crystal arch pulsing with golden runes. But the spire wasn't done. The bridge cracked, fragments dissolving into the chasm, and the runes flared red again, as if the crucible refused to yield. Jack's vision blurred, pain and exhaustion threatening to drag him under. But Vera's claws pulled him forward, her scales blazing despite her wounds. "We are not done," she snarled, her voice a fire that burned away his fear. Together, Jack. The bridge collapsed behind them, the hounds plummeting into the abyss with unearthly shrieks. Jack and Vera reached the arch, but the spire's runes pulsed one final time, and a wall of golden energy flared before the sanctum, its surface rippling with images, Jack's doubts, Vera's fears. Every moment they'd question their bond. "The spire's last judgment," Vera whispered, her voice trembling. "It demands our truth." Jack's chest tightened. Truth? He was a nobody, a miner who'd stumbled into this mess. But Vera's hand in his, her fire, her trust, it was real, more real than any fear. "Screw your judgment," Jack said, his voice steady despite the pain. He turned to Vera, meeting her golden eyes. "You're my partner, Vera. Not because of some cosmic rule, but because I choose you. That's my truth." Her scales flared, her jaws parting in a fierce smile. "And you are mine, human," she said, her voice a vow. "Let the spire burn." They stepped forward together, hands clasped, and pressed against the energy wall. It resisted, its images flaring brighter. Jack's failures, Vera's battles, but their bond was stronger. The wall shattered, dissolving into sparks, and the sanctum's light enveloped them, warm and approving. They stumbled into the sanctum, a chamber of pure crystal that hummed with a gentle, living pulse. At its center, a pedestal held a single rune, glowing with a light that felt like home. The spire's scream was gone, the hounds silenced, the chasm sealed. Jack collapsed to his knees, his scorched back screaming, but he grinned up at Vera. "We did it," he panted. "Told you humans are stubborn." Vera knelt beside him, her claws brushing his face, her scales radiant. "You did more than that," she said, her voice soft but fierce. "You rewrote the Crucible's rules. No Clithery could have done this." Jack's grin widened, though his vision swam. "Yeah, well, you're not so bad yourself. Kind of like having a dragon on my team." Vera's laugh was sharp, vibrant, as she pressed her forehead to his, her warmth chasing away the pain. "You are impossible," she murmured, her tail curling around him. "And I would have no other." The rune on the pedestal flared, its light bathing them, and Jack felt a surge of energy, like their bond was sealed not just in words, but in something deeper, eternal. The sanctum hummed, its walls pulsing in sync with their heartbeats, and Jack knew the Crucible had no more tests to throw at them. They'd won, not just survival, but each other. But as Vera's claws steadied him, and the rune's light grew brighter, he felt a new weight. Their bond was real, but what came next was a challenge no Crucible could prepare them for. The sanctum's crystal walls pulsed softly, their gentle hum a stark contrast to the spire of Ascendance's earlier screams. Jack Ramsey slumped against Vera, his scorched back and shoulder throbbing, but the pain couldn't dim his grin. The pedestal's rune glowed with a warm, golden light, its energy washing over them like a tide of approval. Vera's crimson scales shimmered, her golden eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief as she knelt beside him, her claws steadying his trembling frame. "We are alive," she whispered, her voice raw, almost disbelieving. "The Crucible, it has accepted us." Jack chuckled, though it came out as a wheeze. "Yeah, told you we'd give it a run for its money. Humans don't quit, and you're one hell of a partner." Vera's jaws parted in a sharp laugh, her tail curling tighter around him, as she pressed her forehead to his again, her warmth chasing away the ache in his bones. Her scales flared brighter, and she pulled back slightly, her eyes searching his. "You saw what no Clithery could," she said, her voice fierce but soft. "Your mind, it was stubbornness. It turned the spire's own game against it. I am honored to be yours." The word, yours, hit Jack like a jolt, stirring something deeper than adrenaline. He met her gaze, his grin softening. "Honored, huh? Guess I'm not just a squishy human anymore." Vera's tail twitched, and she leaned closer, her breath hot against his cheek. "You were never just that," she murmured, her claws brushing his jaw with a tenderness that made his heart race. The rune's light surged, and a wave of energy flowed through them, warm and electric, as if the sanctum itself was sealing their bond. Jack felt it, a connection, not just to Vera, but to something vast, eternal, like their trust had rewritten the stars. Outside, the Colosseum's roar filtered through the sanctum's walls, a distant echo of the crowd's confusion and awe. The Zycarian referee's voice crackled over an unseen calm, frantic and bewildered. "The trial is complete. The human and Vera have succeeded." The crowd's cheers turned to gasps, then a chaotic mix of chants and protests. Jack laughed, leaning into Vera. "Sounds like we just broke their betting pools." Vera's eyes glinted with amusement, but her grip on him tightened, protective and proud. "Let them marvel," she said. "They will never understand what we are." The sanctum's light dimmed slightly, and the pedestal's rune pulsed one final time, projecting a faint hollow image of Zorith, the Clithery Elder. His aged scales gleamed, but his triple jaws hung open, his golden eyes wide with shock. "Impossible," he rasped, his voice trembling. "A human, and Vera, you have defied the Crucible." He paused, then bowed, a gesture so rare it silenced the distant crowd. "The right of binding is true. You are bound by will and truth." Jack raised an eyebrow, glancing at Vera. So, we're official now? Do we get a certificate or something? Vera's laugh was vibrant, echoing in the chamber, and she pulled him closer, her tail coiling around his legs. We get each other, human. That is enough. The sanctum's glow faded to a soft shimmer, and a hidden door slid open in the crystal wall, revealing a tunnel that led back to the Colosseum's arena. Jack Ramsey, still leaning on Vera for support, felt the weight of their victory settle in, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her claws steadied him as they stepped into the tunnel, her crimson scales pulsing faintly, her tail brushing his leg with a possessiveness that felt both thrilling and comforting. The distant roar of the crowd grew louder, a tidal wave of alien voices chanting their names. Mostly Vera's, but Jack caught a few shouts of human that made him grin. Guess I'm famous now, he said, wincing as his scorched back protested. Think they'll put me on a hollow poster? Vera's golden eyes glinted with amusement, but her voice was warm, almost tender. They will sing of you, Jack Ramsey, she said, her jaws parting in a fierce smile. The human who tamed the crucible and a Clithery's heart. Jack's face heated, and he scratched his neck, trying to play it cool. Tamed, huh? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm still figuring out how to not trip over your tail. Her laugh echoed through the tunnel, sharp and vibrant, and she pulled him closer, her warmth a shield against the pain. They emerged into the arena under the violet glow of Zykar's twin moons, the crowd's cheers shaking the crystalline walls. Thousands of aliens, scaled, feathered, tentacled, surged to their feet, their translators buzzing with awe and disbelief. The Zykarian referee hovered above, its tentacles waving frantically as it amplified its voice. Vera of Clan Clythar and Jack Ramsey, the human, have conquered the crucible. Their bond is sealed, their truth undeniable. The crowd roared louder, some throwing glowing orbs that burst into sparks, a Zykarian gesture of honor. Jack waved, his grin lopsided. Not bad for a guy who lost a bar bet. Zorith, the Clithery elder, appeared in a towering hollow image, his aged scales gleaming with reluctant respect. Human, he boomed, his triple jaws snapping. You have proven what no Clithery believed possible. Your kind is more than we knew. He turned to Vera, his eyes softening. And you, daughter of Clythar, have found a worthy chosen. The right is sacred, and your bond will be honored. The crowd's chants shifted, a rhythmic pulse of bound. Bound, that made Jack's chest swell with something like pride. Vera's claws tightened around his hand, and she faced Zorith, her voice steady but fierce. Jack is not just my chosen, she said, her scales flaring crimson. He is my equal. Together, we will forge a new path. Zorith's jaws parted in surprise, but he bowed again, deeper this time, and the hollow image faded. The crowd's cheers peaked, and Jack felt a rush of adrenaline, like he'd just won the galaxy's wildest lottery. Equal. Huh, he said, glancing at Vera. You sure you're ready for a human psychic? Her tail flicked his leg, playful but firm. I'm ready for you, Jack. Always. The arena guards escorted them to a raised platform, where a Zykarian healer, a spindly creature with glowing hands, tended to Jack's wounds, its touch cool and soothing. As the healer worked, Vera stood close, her presence a quiet strength. Jack watched her, his grin softening. So what's next? We hit the galactic bar scene. Tell everyone how we beat a death maze. Vera's eyes softened, and she leaned in, her breath hot against his ear. Next, we live, she murmured. Together, wherever the stars take us. The healer stepped back, and Jack stood, his pain dulled but his heart racing. The crowd was dispersing, but a few aliens lingered, their eyes wide with curiosity, some even approaching to offer gifts, crystals, woven bands, tokens of respect. Jack accepted a small, glowing orb, turning it in his hands. Guess humans aren't just meat sacks anymore, he said, tossing it to Vera. She caught it, her claws deft, and her laugh was a sound he knew he'd never tire of. As they left the arena, the twin moons casting long shadows, Jack felt a shift, like the galaxy had tilted slightly. He wasn't just a miner or a pilot anymore. He was bound to Vera, to something bigger than himself. The Crucible had tested them, but it had also shown him what he was capable of, what they were capable of together. "Hey, Vera," he said, his voice quieter now. "Thanks for not letting me die back there." She stopped, her scales pulsing softly, and pressed her forehead to his, her claws brushing his cheek. "And you, human, for showing me what it means to trust." They walked into the night, the Colosseum's lights fading behind them, and Jack knew this was no ending, just the start of a story no one, not even the stars, could have predicted. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and wonders, but with Vera by his side, he was ready for anything. Or at least, he'd fake it till he figured it out.